What happens when a British teacher's dream job in paradise becomes her death sentence? When 30-year-old Clara Hawthorne signed that teaching contract in the glittering Emirates, she thought she'd found her golden ticket, tax-free salary, marble apartments, and endless sunshine. But buried in her welcome packet was a single line that would seal her fate. Romantic liaisons with Emirati nationals are discouraged and may attract unwanted scrutiny. Have you ever ignored a warning because it seemed ridiculous at the time? Have you ever met someone so charming, so powerful, that red flags looked like confetti? Clara did, and it cost her everything. I'm talking about a forbidden romance that shook an entire nation. A love affair between a young British teacher and one of the most powerful men in the Middle East, His Excellency Sheikh Tariq bin Zayed Al Safar, brother to the Emir himself. A man so untouchable that even mentioning his name in the wrong context could destroy careers. But here's what makes this case absolutely explosive. When Clara's charred remains were discovered in the desert, dental records confirming her identity, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in the Emirates' history, a member of the royal family was charged with murder. The international headlines screamed justice, but was it real, or just another carefully crafted illusion? If you've ever felt that gut instinct about someone dangerous, hit subscribe, because the story might just save your life. We're about to expose how wealth, power, and manipulation create the perfect storm for murder. How a single phone call at midnight became a death warrant. And how a mother's relentless fight for justice brought down one of the most protected men in the Gulf. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a masterclass in recognizing predators who hide behind privilege. It's about understanding that no amount of platinum bracelets, desert safaris, or promises of endowments can mask the scent of danger. Clara Hawthorne learned this lesson too late, but you don't have to. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how powerful men use their status to hunt vulnerable women. You'll recognize the warning signs Clara missed. And you'll discover why this case sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles from London to Dubai. So buckle up, because we're about to reveal how a simple teaching contract became an international murder investigation that nearly toppled a government. The truth about Clara's final moments will leave you speechless. Clara Hawthorne wasn't your typical adventure seeker. She was methodical, cautious, the type who researched everything twice before making decisions. Her friends back in Manchester often joked that she planned her grocery trips like military operations. So when she accepted the position at Al Thuraya International School in Al Sadr, it wasn't impulsive. She'd spent months analyzing salary packages, reading expat forums, and even learning basic Arabic phrases on Duolingo. August 2022 marked her fresh start. The recruitment agency had painted a compelling picture. British curriculum, international colleagues, and a chance to save serious money while experiencing Middle Eastern culture. Clara arrived alongside dozens of other teachers, South Africans fleeing economic uncertainty, Canadians seeking adventure, Brits chasing tax-free salaries. They were the hopeful ones, clutching their 2-year contracts like lottery tickets. The school's human resources team had everything organized with military precision. Each teacher received keys to fully furnished apartments with marble floors that stayed cool even in 40-degree heat. The welcome packages were generous. Supermarket vouchers worth a month's groceries, prepaid SIM cards already activated, and that thick binder everyone received but few actually read. Clara, being Clara, read every page. Most of it was standard expatriate guidance: dress modestly in public, respect prayer times, never drink alcohol outside licensed venues. But wedged between advice about appropriate swimwear and warnings against photographing government buildings was that single, seemingly innocent line: romantic liaisons with Emirati nationals are discouraged and may attract unwanted scrutiny. She laughed when she read it, actually laughed out loud in her empty apartment, the sound echoing off those pristine marble walls. Who writes stuff like that? It felt like something from a 1950s etiquette manual. Clara folded the page like a fortune cookie slip and tossed it in her kitchen drawer, never giving it another thought. The expatriate community in Al Sadr operated like a small town within a city. Everyone knew everyone. Gossip traveled faster than sandstorms, and social life revolved around the few places that could legally serve alcohol. Hotel bars became the unofficial community centers where teachers, engineers, and consultants gathered to complain about bureaucracy, share apartment hunting tips, and swap stories about cultural misunderstandings. Thursday evenings were sacred, the Gulf's equivalent of Friday night celebrations. The Obsidian Hotel's rooftop lounge became the weekly pilgrimage site, where violet neon lights cast everything in an otherworldly glow and conversations flowed as freely as the overpriced cocktails. Clara initially felt overwhelmed by the social pressure, but her colleagues insisted, "You can't survive here without the Thursday crew." Within weeks, she'd established her routine. Finish lesson planning by 6, quick shower, modest but stylish outfit, always walking that fine line between fitting in with expats and respecting local customs. The Obsidian became her weekly escape, a place where she could temporarily forget about visa renewals, cultural adaptation stress, and the constant awareness of being a foreign woman in a conservative society. But here's what Clara didn't realize, and what that discarded warning page should have emphasized. Al-Sadr wasn't just any emirate. It was a place where traditional power structures remained absolute, where certain families operated above conventional law, and where foreign women, especially attractive ones, could become targets for men who viewed them as exotic conquests rather than human beings. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, and tell me, have you ever ignored a warning that you later regretted? Because Clara's decision to dismiss that single line of text was about to set in motion a chain of events that would captivate international headlines and forever change how expatriate communities view safety in the Gulf. The stage was set. The warning had been given and ignored. All that remained was the introduction of the predator. September 29, 2022. A date that would later be dissected by investigators, analyzed by forensic psychologists, and remembered by Clara's friends as the night everything changed. It started like any other Thursday evening at the Obsidian Hotel, teachers gathering after another week of lesson plans and parent meetings. The familiar ritual of decompressing under those violet neon lights. Clara had been in Al-Sadr for exactly 6 weeks. She'd found her rhythm. Morning coffee on her balcony overlooking the marina, afternoon classes with Year 6 students who called her Miss Clara in their adorable mix of accents, and these weekly social gatherings that kept homesickness at bay. She was ordering her usual, a glass of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, when the atmosphere in the rooftop lounge shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No fanfare, no announcements. Just a subtle change in energy that made conversations pause mid-sentence and heads turn toward the elevator bank. 2 men in plain clothes had emerged first, their eyes scanning the crowd with professional intensity. They weren't obviously security, no earpieces or visible weapons, but their presence commanded immediate attention. Then he appeared. His Excellency Sheikh Tariq bin Zahid al-Safar moved through the space like he owned it, which Clara would later learn he essentially did. At 52, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in any language. His linen shirt was perfectly tailored, his watch caught the neon light with expensive precision, and his smile, when he chose to deploy it, could disarm skeptics and charm critics. Clara was still waiting for her wine when she heard that voice behind her. "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing your accent." Perfect English, Oxford educated, with just enough of his native inflection to sound exotic rather than foreign. "Are you finding suitable alternatives to British wine in our desert paradise?" She turned, expecting another expat making conversation. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man whose presence seemed to bend the room's gravity toward him. Other patrons had created a respectful distance without being asked. The bartender had straightened his posture. Even the background music seemed quieter. "I'm still exploring my options," Clara replied, immediately aware that this wasn't a casual encounter. The man's attention felt laser-focused, as if she were the only person in a crowded room. It was flattering and unsettling in equal measure. "Tariq," he said, extending his hand. No titles, no explanations. Just a first name delivered with the confidence of someone whose identity needed no introduction. "Clara. Clara Hawthorne. Ah, a teacher at Al-Thuraya. Excellent institution. I've had the pleasure of supporting their scholarship programs." He gestured toward a private table overlooking the marina, where the city's lights reflected off dark water like scattered diamonds. Would you join me? I'd love to hear your impressions of our emirate. Here's what Clara should have noticed. How quickly he'd identified her workplace, how the staff treated him with deference bordering on fear, how his invitation felt more like a gentle command. But she was 29 years old, flattered by attention from someone clearly important, and operating under the naive assumption that powerful men in expensive hotels were automatically safe. They talked for 2 hours. Tarek spoke eloquently about Oxford summers, quoted Philip Larkin with genuine appreciation, and demonstrated knowledge of British politics that impressed even Clara's cynical teacher brain. He asked thoughtful questions about her students, her adjustment to Gulf life, her career aspirations. He was charming, intelligent, and seemingly fascinated by her perspectives. But here's what Clara didn't know, and what would later emerge during the investigation. Sheikh Tarek had a pattern. Young foreign women, particularly teachers and nurses, particularly those new to the region and still finding their social footing. The Obsidian Hotel wasn't a coincidence. It was a hunting ground. If you're still watching, comment danger, because what happens next will shock you. Clara was about to accept an invitation that would seal her fate, and the warning signs were flashing red in a language she didn't yet understand. What followed was 6 weeks of psychological manipulation disguised as romance. Clara entered what she believed was a fairy tale relationship, but forensic psychologists would later identify it as a textbook case of predatory grooming, wealth, and status weaponized to create dependency and silence. The pattern began immediately. 3 days after their Obsidian meeting, a black Mercedes appeared outside Al Thuraya International School. The driver, impeccably dressed and speaking minimal English, handed Clara an envelope containing a handwritten note. "Dinner tonight? My driver will collect you at 7. No phone number, no return address, just an assumption that she would comply. Clara told her colleague Nicole Grant she was seeing someone important, but never revealed his identity. This wasn't accidental coyness, or Tarek had specifically requested discretion. My position requires careful consideration of public perception, he'd explained during their second meeting. Surely you understand the delicate nature of cross-cultural relationships in our region. The venues were always spectacular. A beachfront villa screened by palm trees and automatic security gates that recognized license plates before drivers could announce themselves. Inside, uniformed staff served mezzi on silver platters while an antique gramophone played Kulthum at volumes that encouraged intimate conversation. Everything was designed to overwhelm Clara's senses and create the illusion of exclusive access to a world beyond her imagination. Tarek was a master manipulator who understood exactly which psychological buttons to press. He showered Clara with gifts that weren't just expensive. They were personal. A platinum bracelet engraved with coordinates of their first meeting location. A private desert safari complete with Bedouin guides who treated her like visiting royalty. Most significantly, he promised to establish a teaching endowment in her name, claiming her educational philosophy deserved permanent recognition. But manipulation through luxury was only half the strategy. Tarek also employed emotional control through manufactured scarcity. He would disappear for days without explanation, leaving Clara anxious and questioning her worth. Then he'd reappear with elaborate apologies about state obligations and family responsibilities, making her feel guilty for expecting consistency from someone so obviously important. The psychological trap was closing, but Clara couldn't see it. She was experiencing what experts call trauma bonding, the addictive cycle of tension followed by relief that keeps victims attached to their abusers. Every time Tarek withdrew his attention, Clara worked harder to regain it. Every time he returned with gifts and promises, she felt grateful rather than manipulated. Their conversations revealed the depth of his control strategy. Clara wanted transparency. She asked repeatedly about meeting his family, about making their relationship public, about building something genuine together. Tarek's responses were masterfully crafted to maintain hope while ensuring impossibility. My family operates under traditional expectations, he'd explain. But love finds a way, doesn't it? We simply need patience. The messages Clara sent to Nicole during this period paint a disturbing picture. "He's unlike anyone I've ever met," she wrote. "Complicated family situation, but he's working on it." Another message: "I know it seems secretive, but you don't understand the pressure he faces. His position makes everything difficult." Classic victim language. Clara was defending her abuser's behavior, making excuses for treatment she would never accept from an ordinary man. Tarek had successfully convinced her that his wealth and status justified the secrecy, the emotional unavailability, and the growing sense that she was living someone else's life rather than her own. The villa became her golden prison. Beautiful, luxurious, but ultimately isolating. Clara stopped attending Thursday gatherings at the Obsidian. She declined invitations from other teachers. Her social circle contracted until it consisted entirely of Tarek and his carefully selected staff, people who would never challenge his narrative or offer Clara alternative perspectives. But even the most sophisticated manipulation has limits. By early October, Clara was pushing back. She wanted answers about their future. She demanded to know why she couldn't meet his family, why their relationship had to remain completely hidden, why she felt more like a kept secret than a cherished partner. Before we reveal what happened that final night, smash that subscribe button. Because 97% of you watching aren't subscribed, and that honestly breaks my heart. We're about to expose how this psychological warfare escalated into physical violence, and you need to understand these warning signs. Clara was about to discover that when you threaten a predator's control, they don't negotiate. They eliminate the threat. October 10th, 2022. A Tuesday evening that would become the most scrutinized date in Al-Sadr's criminal history. Clara had been pushing for answers about their relationship's future for weeks, and Tarek had finally agreed to what he called a serious conversation about our path forward. The location he chose was telling. The Serpentine, a fusion restaurant perched 50 stories above the city, where privacy was guaranteed and witnesses were minimal. CCTV cameras captured their arrival at 21:17. Clara wore a navy dress, conservative enough for local standards, elegant enough for fine dining. Tarek appeared relaxed in his signature linen, but security footage would later reveal subtle signs of tension. His jaw was set, his usual easy smile absent. Bodyguard Hadi Al-Qahtani followed at the prescribed distance, his expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses despite the evening hour. The restaurant's maitre d' escorted them to Tarek's regular table, a corner booth with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Emirates' glittering skyline. Other diners recognized the chic but maintained respectful distance, understanding that proximity to power required careful navigation. For the first hour, everything appeared normal. They ordered wine, a bottle of French Bordeaux that cost more than Clara's monthly salary. They shared appetizers, discussed her students' progress, debated Middle Eastern politics with the intellectual sparring that had initially attracted them to each other. To casual observers, they looked like any affluent couple enjoying an expensive evening out. But body language experts who later analyzed the footage identified troubling patterns. Clara's gestures became increasingly animated as the evening progressed. She leaned forward, her hands moving in short, emphatic motions that suggested frustration or pleading. Tarek remained physically still, his posture rigid, occasionally checking his phone with the dismissive air of someone whose attention was elsewhere. The conversation that would seal Clara's fate began around 23:30. Restaurant staff later testified that voices from their table became audible despite the establishment's acoustic design prioritizing privacy. Clara was heard saying, "I can't keep living like this, and you promised things would change." Tarek's responses were quieter, but witnesses caught fragments, unrealistic expectations, and complications you don't understand. By midnight, the tension was visible even from across the dining room. Clara had stopped eating, her wine glass untouched for the past hour. She was gesturing more frantically now, her voice carrying despite obvious attempts to maintain composure. Other diners began glancing toward their table, sensing drama unfolding among the city's elite. The breaking point came at 0:15. Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against marble flooring with a sound that momentarily silenced nearby conversations. She gathered her purse, said something that made Tarek's expression harden, and walked toward the restaurant's exit. Tarek followed, his movement controlled but urgent, while Hadi trailed behind with the practiced invisibility of professional security. The elevator lobby became the stage for their final public confrontation. CCTV captured Clara pacing in tight circles, her hands moving in those same chopping motions that would later be analyzed by behavioral experts. Tarek stood with his back to the camera, but his body language suggested someone delivering ultimatums rather than negotiating compromises. At 0:42, they left together. The footage shows Clara walking ahead, her stride quick and agitated, while Tarek followed with Hadi flanking them both. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a couple having a typical argument after too much wine and too much honesty. But Clara's final act of the evening revealed her growing desperation. In the elevator lobby, she made a phone call, 22 seconds, that would haunt investigators for months. Nicole Grant answered on the third ring, expecting typical post-dinner gossip. Instead, she heard Clara's voice, tight with emotion. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow. I can't talk now, but I need you to know. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident." The line went dead. Nicole tried calling back immediately, but Clara's phone went straight to voicemail. Comment below if you think Clara should have left that night. Your answer might surprise you. Because what happened next transformed a relationship dispute into an international murder investigation that would expose the darkest corners of power and privilege. Tomorrow never came for Clara Hawthorne. Wednesday morning, October 11th, 2022. Room 6B at Al Thuraya International School sat in perfect rows. 28 Year 6 students waiting for their homeroom teacher who never arrived. The substitute teacher, Mrs. Rahman, marked Clara absent on the attendance sheet and reported it to the front office by 8 o'clock. In the Gulf's expatriate teaching community, unexplained absences were rare. Visa requirements and contract obligations made teachers extremely reliable. By 10:30, the school's administration was concerned enough to call Clara's mobile straight to voicemail. They tried her apartment landline. No answer. The head of human resources, remembering Clara's exemplary attendance record, escalated the matter to the principal's office. Meanwhile, Nicole Grant was experiencing her own growing anxiety. Clara's cryptic phone call from the night before had left her unsettled, but she'd assumed it was relationship drama that would resolve itself by morning. When Clara failed to respond to her usual good morning WhatsApp message, Nicole's concern shifted into alarm. At 11:45, Nicole made a decision that would prove crucial to the investigation. She drove directly to Clara's apartment complex, using the spare key Clara had given her for emergencies. The building's security guard recognized Nicole from previous visits and allowed her access without question. Clara's apartment told a story of interrupted routine. A coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter, still containing cold remnants from the previous evening. Her laptop was open on the dining table, displaying a half-finished lesson plan for Thursday's geography class. Most significantly, her passport remained in the bedroom drawer, something no expatriate teacher would leave behind if planning to travel. Nicole's hands shook as she called Clara's phone again. This time, she heard it ringing from somewhere inside the apartment. Following the sound, she found Clara's mobile wedged between sofa cushions, its battery nearly dead. The last outgoing call was timestamped 0:42, their conversation from the restaurant elevator lobby. By noon, Nicole was at Al Sadr Central Police Station, filing a missing person report. The desk sergeant, Corporal Mahmoud al-Rashid, initially followed standard protocol. Adults missing for less than 48 hours weren't considered high priority unless circumstances suggested immediate danger. But Clara's case had complicating factors that elevated its urgency. She was a foreign national employed at a school with diplomatic families. Her disappearance occurred on a school night, making it completely out of character. Most importantly, she was a single woman in a conservative society where unexplained absences often indicated serious trouble. The report was escalated within hours to Major Saif al-Madawi of the Criminal Investigations Department. Major Saif, a 20-year veteran with experience in cases involving expatriate communities, recognized the potential for international complications. British nationals who disappeared in the Gulf attracted embassy attention, media scrutiny, and diplomatic pressure that could complicate investigations. But what investigators found next changed everything. When Major Safe's team began their preliminary digital forensics, standard procedure for missing person cases, they discovered something that transformed Clara's disappearance from a routine investigation into a potential diplomatic crisis. If this story is keeping you on edge, subscribe now, because the investigation gets even more intense. What they found in Clara's phone records would expose a connection so powerful, so protected, that even seasoned investigators hesitated before pursuing it. The missing teacher case was about to become something much more dangerous. October 15, 2022. For days after Clara's disappearance, 2 weekend hikers made a discovery that would transform a missing person case into an international murder investigation. Ahmed and Khalil, both geology students from the local university, were exploring the Ramlat Dahana desert region, collecting rock samples for their thesis project. The smell hit them first. Even in the desert's dry heat, the stench of burned organic matter carries for kilometers when wind conditions are right. They followed the odor across sand dunes and rocky outcroppings until they reached a depression sheltered by natural rock formations, the perfect location for someone wanting to avoid detection from the main highway. What they found defied their worst expectations. A fire pit, roughly 2 meters in diameter, filled with charred debris that clearly wasn't from a camping trip. Scattered around the perimeter were fragments of fabric, melted plastic, and something that made both students immediately call the police. Human bone fragments, some still bearing traces of flesh. Vultures circled overhead, their presence confirming what the students already suspected. This wasn't an accident or a traditional burial site. Someone had deliberately attempted to destroy evidence, and they'd done it with methodical precision. The Criminal Investigations Department's forensic team arrived within 2 hours, led by Dr. Fatima Al-Zahra, the Emirates' chief medical examiner. What she documented at the scene would later become crucial evidence in the prosecution's case against Sheikh Tariq. The fire had burned at extremely high temperatures, hot enough to crack bones and melt metal, but not hot enough to completely destroy everything. Among the debris, investigators recovered several items that would prove Clara's identity and reveal the brutality of her final moments. A fragment of platinum jewelry, partially melted but still bearing recognizable engravings. When cleaned and examined under magnification, the coordinates were clearly visible. The same coordinates from Clara's bracelet, marking the location of her first meeting with Tariq at the Obsidian Hotel. More disturbing was the kitchen knife, its blade protruding from what remained of a human ribcage. The weapon had been left in place, suggesting either panic or arrogance on the killer's part. Forensic analysis would later confirm that the knife came from an expensive German cutlery set, the type found in luxury kitchens throughout Al-Sadr's wealthy districts. Dr. Al-Zahra's preliminary examination revealed the true horror of Clara's final moments. The positioning of bone fragments and the knife's location indicated that Clara had been stabbed multiple times in the chest before the fire was lit. But tissue analysis revealed something even more chilling. She had been alive, at least briefly, when the flames began. The autopsy, conducted under international observation due to diplomatic pressure, confirmed the timeline. Death occurred between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock on October 11th. Exactly when Clara should have been sleeping safely in her apartment after her dinner with Tariq. 3 distinct stab wounds to the chest, each delivered with enough force to penetrate bone. The killer had been close, personal, and filled with rage. Dental records, flown in from Clara's dentist in Manchester, provided final confirmation. The remains belonged to Clara Hawthorne, the missing British teacher whose disappearance had already attracted embassy attention and media coverage. But the forensic evidence revealed something else that would prove crucial to the investigation. Accelerant residue on Clara's clothing contained traces of a specific type of cologne, an expensive oud fragrance that was custom blended for wealthy clients in the region. If you're feeling as angry as I am right now, let me know in the comments. Justice for Clara starts with us caring. because what investigators discovered next would expose a connection so powerful that even seasoned detectives questioned whether justice was possible. The desert had revealed its secrets, but the real battle was just beginning. The discovery of Clara's remains triggered an investigation that would test the limits of justice in a society built on hierarchical power structures. Major Saif al-Madawi knew he was walking into a minefield, but even he couldn't have predicted how explosive the evidence would become. Digital forensics provided the first breakthrough. Gulf telecommunications regulations require carriers to store call detail records for 5 years, and within 24 hours, investigators had Clara's complete communication history. The data painted a clear picture of her final weeks, hundreds of calls and messages to a single number registered under Heritage Holdings LLC. A simple corporate registry search revealed Heritage Holdings as an umbrella company with tentacles reaching into real estate, hospitality, and cultural preservation projects throughout the Emirate. The company's primary shareholder and managing director, His Excellency Sheikh Tariq bin Zahid Al Safar. Major Saif stared at the documents for a full minute before speaking. In 20 years of police work, he'd never encountered a case where the evidence pointed directly toward someone so politically untouchable. Protocol demanded he request an interview through the royal court, but everyone involved understood this was more formality than genuine investigation. The royal court's response arrived within hours. His Excellency was attending to urgent state business abroad and would be unavailable for the foreseeable future. No timeline, no alternative arrangements, no acknowledgement that a British citizen had been murdered, and the evidence suggested their involvement. While bureaucrats exchanged carefully worded memos, Major Saif's team pursued other leads. CCTV analysis from the city's highway network revealed a crucial timeline. Tariq's midnight blue Lexus LX 570, a vehicle distinctive enough to be easily tracked, had left the city center at 1:07 on October 11th, heading east toward the desert region where Clara's body was discovered. Automatic number plate recognition gantries, installed throughout Al Sadr as part of a traffic management system, logged the Lexus at 3 different desert junctions. The timestamps created a perfect trail: 1:23 at the Highway 7 interchange, 1:41 at the Ramlat Dahana access road, and finally 2:15 at a remote checkpoint just 5 kilometers from where hikers would later find Clara's remains. The return journey was equally well documented. The same license plate triggered cameras at 4:23, heading back toward the city. Total time in the desert: 3 hours and 16 minutes. More than enough time to commit murder and attempt to destroy the evidence. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. At 1:46, security cameras at a Route 17 fuel station captured bodyguard Hadi Al-Qahtani purchasing 2 5-liter cans of petrol and a bag of charcoal. He paid cash, unusual for someone whose employer provided corporate credit cards for all expenses. The transaction receipt, recovered from the station's records, would later become Exhibit A in the prosecution's case. International pressure was mounting rapidly. Clara's disappearance had initially attracted routine embassy attention, but the discovery of her murdered remains triggered a diplomatic crisis. British MPs raised questions in Parliament. The Foreign Office issued statements about ensuring justice for British nationals abroad. Social media campaigns with hashtags like #JusticeForClara and #SilencedInSadr began trending across multiple countries. The Al Sadr government found itself in an impossible position. Ignoring the evidence would invite international sanctions and damage the Emirates' reputation as a safe destination for foreign investment and tourism. But pursuing charges against a royal family member was unprecedented and potentially destabilizing. Under this mounting pressure, authorities made a calculated decision. On October 22nd, police arrested Hadi Al-Qahtani at his apartment in the capital security district. The arrest was conducted quietly, without media notification, but word spread quickly through the expatriate community. During a 14-hour interrogation conducted without legal representation, standard practice under Al Sadr's security laws, Hadi signed a confession that satisfied no one who read it. According to his statement, Clara had begged for a ride to clear her head after her dinner with Tariq. During the drive, she had allegedly attempted to seduce him, then attacked him with a knife when he refused her advances. He claimed the stabbing was self-defense and the fire was panic-driven evidence destruction. Subscribe if you believe in justice, because what happens next will restore your faith in the system. The confession was about to fall apart under scrutiny, and the real killer was running out of places to hide. Hottie's confession crumbled under basic scrutiny. The bodyguard claimed Clara attacked him with a knife, yet he bore no defensive wounds on his hands or arms. He was 5 inches taller than Clara, trained in close-quarters combat, and outweighed her by 40 kilograms. The idea that a British teacher could overpower a professional security operative was laughable to anyone with basic understanding of physics. More damaging to his story was the GPS evidence. Fleet tracking data from Tariq's vehicle showed the Sheikh's personal phone pinging off the same cell tower near the desert crime scene at 2:10, exactly when Hottie claimed to be acting alone. When investigators requested to examine that phone, the public prosecutor's office issued an immunity notice citing national security concerns. But international pressure was reaching a breaking point. Clara's mother, Margaret Hawthorne, arrived in Al-Sadr carrying a scrapbook of her daughter's childhood photos and a determination that impressed even hardened diplomats. Her tearful appearances outside the courthouse, clutching pictures of Clara's graduation day and first teaching position, galvanized media coverage across Europe and North America. The British Foreign Office escalated their diplomatic pressure. Trade delegations were quietly postponed. Investment discussions stalled. The message was clear. Justice for Clara Hawthorne wasn't negotiable, and the international community was watching every move. Faced with potential economic consequences, the Al-Sadr government made an unprecedented decision. On December 3rd, a special judicial panel overruled the immunity notice, ordering Sheikh Tariq to surrender his passport and appear for questioning. The interrogation, conducted behind closed doors with only court stenographers present, lasted exactly 2 hours. Tariq's responses, later leaked to international media, revealed a man accustomed to controlling narratives through wealth and influence. He admitted to a consensual friendship with Clara but denied any violence. According to his statement, their dinner had ended amicably, and he had no knowledge of her subsequent disappearance until police contacted him. When confronted with the GPS evidence placing his phone near the crime scene, Tariq claimed he had loaned the device to Hottie for security coordination purposes. When asked about the fuel station footage showing his bodyguard purchasing accelerants, he expressed shock and betrayal at Hottie's actions. Released on bail worth 10 million dirhams, Tariq retreated to a palace compound surrounded by military guards. But his legal troubles were far from over. The trial of Hottie Al-Qahtani opened in February 2023 with international observers filling the courthouse gallery. Prosecutors presented GPS logs, fuel station receipts, and the signed confession. Defense attorneys argued the confession was coerced and pointed to their client's clean criminal record and years of loyal service. But the trial took an explosive turn when Dr. Yasmin Al-Khoury, a junior forensic analyst, took the witness stand. Perhaps naive to the political implications of her testimony, she revealed that accelerant residue on Clara's clothing contained traces of a specific cologne, an expensive oud fragrance custom blended exclusively for high-end clients. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Al-Khoury explained that only 3 establishments in the entire Gulf region produced this particular blend. One of them was Maison Khaliji, a luxury perfumery that had been supplying Sheikh Tariq's personal fragrance for over a decade. The revelation sent shockwaves through the legal proceedings. Within 24 hours, the Attorney General announced that Sheikh Tariq would be added as a co-defendant, charged with facilitating destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. International media hailed the decision as historic. Never before had a member of Al-Sadr's royal family faced serious criminal charges. Legal experts called it a watershed moment for Gulf justice systems. But locals understood the political calculations involved. Someone higher in the power structure had withdrawn their protection from Tariq. The joint trial captivated the region for months. Testimony painted a disturbing picture of the final night. Clara demanding transparency about their relationship, Tariq refusing to consider public acknowledgement, the argument escalating during the drive to the desert location. Forensic pathologists demonstrated how the knife wounds indicated a right-handed assailant seated directly beside Clara, exactly where Tarek had been positioned in the Lexus. The prosecution argued that Hadi had been following orders, not acting independently. Defense attorneys fought back by portraying Clara as a reckless foreigner who failed to respect local customs and cultural boundaries. They suggested she had threatened to expose the relationship publicly, forcing Tarek to protect his family's honor through desperate measures. When Tarek finally took the witness stand, he invoked poetry, quoting Rumi about love's consuming fire. The three-judge panel remained expressionless throughout his testimony. May 19, 2023, the date that would forever change how the world viewed Gulf justice systems. Chief Judge Khalid al-Mansouri entered the packed courtroom at exactly 10 a.m., his expression revealing nothing about the verdicts that would make international headlines within hours. The gallery was filled with diplomats, journalists, and members of Clara's family who had flown in from Manchester. Margaret Hawthorne sat in the front row, clutching the same scrapbook of photos that had become her symbol of determination throughout the lengthy proceedings. Judge al-Mansouri began with Hadi al-Qahtani's case. The defendant is found guilty of first-degree murder, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to commit murder. The court sentences the defendant to death by firing squad, to be carried out within 60 days of this judgment. Gasps echoed through the courtroom, but everyone understood this was the expected outcome. Hadi had been the expendable player in a much larger game, and his fate had been sealed the moment he signed that confession. But the next verdict would shock the entire region. His Excellency Sheikh Tariq bin Zayed Al Safar, Judge al-Mansouri continued, his voice steady despite the historical weight of his words, is found guilty of accessory to murder, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to commit murder. The court sentences the defendant to 20 years imprisonment at Al Sadr Central Prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. The courtroom erupted. Never before in the Emirates' history had a royal family member received a double-digit prison sentence. International observers applauded. Local journalists frantically typed updates, and Margaret Hawthorne collapsed into tears of relief and exhaustion. Western media proclaimed it a victory for justice over privilege. The BBC ran headlines about Gulf Justice Revolution. CNN featured expert panels discussing the unprecedented accountability for royal family members. The New York Times called it a watershed moment for human rights in the Middle East. But anyone familiar with Gulf politics understood this was only the beginning of a much longer story. The verdicts satisfied international pressure and demonstrated that Al Sadr's justice system could hold powerful people accountable. However, the region's complex pardon and clemency systems meant that actual justice remained uncertain. The first crack in the facade appeared during Ramadan 2024. The Emir announced a series of royal pardons to honor the spirit of mercy and forgiveness during our holiest month. Among hundreds of low-level offenders granted clemency, Hadi al-Qahtani's death sentence was quietly commuted to life imprisonment. International human rights organizations protested, but the decision was presented as humanitarian progress, replacing execution with life imprisonment. The Emir's statement emphasized mercy over vengeance and rehabilitation over retribution, language that played well in international forums while effectively reducing Hadi's punishment. 2 months later, rumors began circulating through Al Sadr's legal community. Tariq's defense team had submitted a medical parole petition, citing severe hypertension and cardiac irregularities that allegedly made prison conditions life-threatening. The petition included medical reports from 3 different specialists, all documenting conditions that had supposedly developed since his incarceration. The petition sat on the Emir's desk for weeks while international pressure mounted. British MPs issued statements warning against any clemency for Tariq. The Foreign Office hinted at trade consequences if justice was undermined through backdoor pardons. Human rights organizations launched social media campaigns demanding transparency in the clemency process. In September 2024, carefully orchestrated leaks from the royal court confirmed that Tariq remained imprisoned, for now. But legal experts familiar with Al Sadr's clemency laws pointed out a troubling timeline. Under existing regulations, any prisoner who serves 1/3 of their sentence with exemplary conduct may petition for early release. For Sheikh Tariq, that milestone arrives in 2030. Whether international attention will remain focused on Clara's case for 7 more years is uncertain. Diplomatic priorities shift, news cycles move on, and business interests have a way of overriding moral considerations. If you believe justice should be permanent, not temporary, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because Clara's story isn't over, it's an ongoing test of whether wealth and power can ultimately escape accountability. Clara Hawthorne's death created ripples that continue to shape lives and policies years after her murder. Her legacy exists not in marble monuments or grand memorials, but in the quiet changes that protect other young women from similar fates. Al Thuraya International School renamed their library the Hawthorne Learning Center in October 2023. The funding came from an anonymous donor, though school administrators privately believe it was one of Tariq's estranged cousins, someone from the royal family attempting to distance themselves from the scandal while honoring Clara's memory. The library now houses over 15,000 books and serves as a reminder that education transcends cultural boundaries. Major Saif al-Madawi pushed the Ministry of Interior to implement mandatory dashcam data retention for all government security details. The policy, informally known as Clara's Law, requires GPS tracking and video recording for any vehicle assigned to high-ranking officials. The regulation faced initial resistance from privacy advocates, but Clara's case demonstrated how crucial such evidence could be in preventing cover-ups. Every October, teachers from the expatriate community gather at the Obsidian Hotel's rooftop lounge. They raise glasses of non-alcoholic sparkling juice. Real wine disappeared from the menu after Clara's death when the emirate tightened alcohol licensing, and share stories about cultural adaptation, personal safety, and the importance of trusting instincts over flattery. But Clara's most important legacy lies in the life lessons her story teaches about recognizing and avoiding predatory relationships, especially in cross-cultural contexts where power dynamics are amplified. First, trust your instincts about power imbalances. Clara ignored that warning in her welcome packet because it seemed ridiculous, but cultural warnings exist for serious reasons. When someone's wealth, status, or political connections create obvious inequality in a relationship, proceed with extreme caution. Predators often use their position to silence victims and escape consequences. Second, never let luxury blind you to danger. Tariq's platinum bracelets, desert safaris, and promises of endowments were tools of manipulation, not expressions of genuine affection. When someone showers you with expensive gifts while demanding secrecy, they're buying your silence, not celebrating your worth. Real love doesn't require hiding. Third, isolation is a weapon. Clara gradually stopped attending social gatherings, declined invitations from colleagues, and allowed her support network to shrink until it consisted entirely of Tariq and his staff. Healthy relationships encourage connections with friends and family. Abusive ones systematically eliminate outside perspectives that might challenge the abuser's control. Fourth, understand that cultural differences can mask abuse. Tariq used family traditions and cultural expectations to justify secrecy and emotional unavailability. While respecting cultural differences is important, abuse is abuse regardless of cultural context. No tradition or custom justifies making someone feel worthless or disposable. Finally, recognize that persistent advocacy saves lives. Clara's justice came because Nicole Grant refused to accept easy explanations, Margaret Hawthorne wouldn't stop fighting, and Major Saif pursued evidence despite political pressure. When someone you care about disappears or seems trapped in a dangerous situation, persistence can literally mean the difference between life and death. Clara's story reminds us that predators exist in every society, at every level of power and privilege. They rely on victims' silence, communities' indifference, and systems' corruption to escape accountability. But they also fear exposure, investigation, and the kind of international attention that Clara's case generated. If Clara's story taught you something valuable, show some love with a like and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because education about predatory behavior isn't just entertainment, it's protection for the next potential victim. Clara Hawthorne's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the price of justice in our interconnected world. A young teacher who simply wanted to experience a different culture became the center of an international murder case that exposed how wealth and status can be weaponized against the vulnerable. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a systemic failure that required international pressure to achieve even partial accountability. The fact that Sheikh Tariq received any prison sentence at all represents progress, but the ongoing concerns about clemency and early release remind us that justice delayed can become justice denied. Clara's memory lives on in the policies that now protect other expatriate workers, the library that bears her name, and the annual gatherings where teachers remember her courage and learn from her mistakes. But perhaps most importantly, her story serves as a warning about the dangers of ignoring red flags when they're wrapped in expensive gifts and powerful connections. The question that haunts this case isn't whether Clara received justice. It's whether that justice will endure long enough to matter. In 2030, when Tariq becomes eligible for early release, will the world still be watching? Will Clara's name still carry enough weight to keep her killer behind bars? Thank you for watching this difficult but important story. If you found value in Clara's lessons, please hit that like button, subscribe for more true crime content, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our investigations into cases that matter. Remember Clara Hawthorne. Remember that justice requires vigilance. And remember that sometimes, the most important stories are the ones that make us uncomfortable.